Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Hare Krishna, welcome dear devotees and well-wishers to Books Are the Basis, an initiative by the ISKCON Education Ministry. The ministry has been conducting interviews of Vaishnavas to hear about their connections to Srila Prabhupada's books, to gain encouragement and inspiration from their experiences. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Her Grace Sudharma Dasi, who is a disciple of Srila Prabhupada and has been practicing Krishna consciousness for 45 years. Throughout her devotional life, she has served as a Sankirtan devotee, an ashram leader, and has traveled throughout the Pacific Northwest of the United States and Southeast Asia, sharing Krishna consciousness through home and community programs. Later in her devotional life, she was active in ISKCON management and served as North American GBC and Temple President Executive Officer. She regularly attended the international GBC meetings. In addition, she founded and ran the North American and International GBC Women's Ministry for over a decade. Currently, her health requires a more reclusive lifestyle, so she works from home producing devotional podcasts and working to build an online devotional radio station called Hare Krishna Community Radio. So Hare Krishna, Sudharma, welcome. I'm so happy to be here with you today.
Thank you. I'm always happy to spend time with you. Yeah.
So we're talking about Srila Prabhupada's books today and how they have inspired your life throughout your 45 years of practice. And my first question for you is, how and when did you first come across Srila Prabhupada's books?
Well, Bhagavatam holds a special place in the world. And of course, Bhagavatam in and of itself is a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So as a person who was being invited into Krishna consciousness by Srila Prabhupada and Krishna, I had an idea in my head as a young teenager, or as an older teenager, but a young adult, that there were books out there that really had explained and had answers for what was happening in life and what was going on around us and what this was all about, the secrets of the world. I knew that they had to be there, and I felt like they were probably, part of an ancient lifestyle, but I didn't know where to look. So I began a search. I was a student at San Francisco State University, and I had even seen devotees, when I was younger for very short periods of time. For example, at Fisherman's Wharf, I had crossed devotees once and seen them in Berkeley on Telegraph Avenue. But I didn't connect that they probably had these books. Like it wouldn't have connected in my mind, So I was looking and I wasn't having much luck. I went to the university library and kind of went through everything there and, just was looking stuff up and talking to people and asking and, doing all these things. And of course, Prabhupada's books were right around the corner, but I didn't find them until one day. I happened to be at a university on the East Coast, and we were sitting with a couple friends in someone else's dorm room, and the conversation was not interesting to me. So I was just kind of looking around and thinking about stuff, and looked on their bookshelf. That was one of the things that I was doing, was looking on people's bookshelves. And there was the Bhagavad Gita and Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, and I pulled it off the shelf, and I only had to read one verse before right away I connected and knew that this was what I had been looking for, Bhagavad Gita.
Mm.
So, there were many events that led up to that desire to want to hear and want to understand. But the ultimate moment of contact was just that very kind of nonchalant afternoon, sitting with friends talking and finding a copy of the Bhagavad Gita on someone's bookshelf. Still, I didn't know that had anything to do with, I didn't know who Srila Prabhupada was or who the devotees were. So that contact came when I went back to San Francisco, and I was living in a group house, while I just coming out of my bachelor's degree studies. And I came in one day and they said, that somebody handed me a sari and said, get dressed, we're going to the Rath Yatra. I didn't know anything about what it was. I put on they helped me put on the sari, which when I got there, it was like trailing behind me, like I didn't know how to wear it or anything. But that was my first time seeing Srila Prabhupada and, really coming in contact with the movement, getting some idea about what it was. I mean, I was limited in what I could understand, but I could definitely understand that Srila Prabhupada was an extraordinary person. I had a very direct experience of, watching Srila Prabhupada come off the cart and walk by nearby and feeling a connection to him personally, of listening to him on the stage, and of a certain kind of quiet control that was there and that nestled into the audience when he spoke, saying that he was not this body. It was as if everything was centered around Srila Prabhupada, the wind, the audience, the hearts of everyone there. And it had a very profound impact on me. So a couple weeks later, I took to Krishna Consciousness and found all of the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. So I would say that Bhagavatam actually brought me to Krishna Consciousness. That's what I was looking for. I was looking to find, a description of the ultimate truth. And I knew it was going to be in a book, and I didn't know it was called Bhagavatam, or I didn't know Song of God, Bhagavad Gita, but that calling made me a devotee.
I really resonate with what you said at the beginning about how you had this desire to find more, to learn more, to kind of find Krishna without actually putting it in those words, without actually knowing who Krishna was. And it just reminds me so much of how it's always said, when you're looking for Krishna, when that spark is lit in your heart, he shows up, he finds a way to connect with you.
Well, if you take even one step, he'll take so many steps towards you, right? But there's also a saying that, if Krishna wants you, he'll drag you to, his lotus feet. That's what I felt happened with me. I felt like, I was going along all happy-go-lucky and life's great and life's like this and life's like that. And then when it was time for me to join the movement, Krishna just went boom, and everything just like crumbled around me. And, I met someone and they said, well, I chant Hare Krishna,
Yeah. That's incredible.
So, a couple people actually came into my life right at that time, and they never became like full practicing sadhana bhaktis themselves, but they introduced me to Krishna consciousness, Then I went to the temple and I arrived like at 7:30 at night, and Shru was there and Jai Tirtha were there. And they said, and I said, can I spend the night? And they talked about, and they came back and they said, if you promise to stay 3 days and serve in the temple, then you can stay tonight. And I said, well, service, I'm always up for service. How can I serve, And so I said, sure. And
That sounds wonderful. Yeah, yeah. Like you said, Krishna drug you along. I
Yeah,
love how I saw your face light up when you talked about coming to the temple and finding Bhagavatam, seeing that
yeah.
Bhagavatam. And I also know that you have a special relationship with the Srimad Bhagavatam. So could you speak a little bit about that?
Well, I think we all do. I mean, I think that one of my very fortunate blessings in devotional life is that I've always just had an overwhelming taste and interest and desire in, reading Bhagavatam, sharing Bhagavatam, talking about, what Prabhupada's saying in the Bhagavatam, what, is said in the Sanskrit, texts of the Bhagavatam, because, there's just everything's actually just so amazing. But even along with that, the thing is, there's nothing about Bhagavatam that's like a two-dimensional aspect. Bhagavatam is really the doorway to the spiritual world, and when they say that you are who you associate with, well, when you're reading Bhagavatam, you're associating with, all the individuals, their experiences, they're sharing them with you, they're opening the door to you, but it isn't two-dimensional. It isn't just a memory recorded on a page. It's actually, the full realize that you can have a full realized experience of that actual pastime, just as if you were observing it directly. I mean, and involved with these individuals directly, because the Bhagavatam is the beautiful stories of the Supreme Lord and his devotees. He's empowered that literature with the pastimes that the devotees have had, and the book is non-different from Krishna himself. So, like, I know, like, some devotees now, everything's available online, and you can, I read all the time off the computer, just it's easier for my eyes with my eyesight. But I know devotees that it's so hard for them, they don't want to read any other way. They want to hold the book in their hands because, ultimately they're feeling that potency of the Supreme Lord and Srila Prabhupada so personally present in that book. And I remember, even before I was a devotee, I had a dream about, some special books in a library. That's probably part of what was there in my psyche when I went looking, some special books in a library, and a personality who would come out and talk about what was happening in those books, that ended with, a picture of a book, and everything in the universe was like, it was like the different colored lights interacting in certain ways, coming in and out of that book. The idea being at the end of that dream that everything, came from and went, like everything was centered in that literature.
Mm.
And I think that, devotees do have a sense of that. Bhagavatam is not an ordinary literature, and it gives us a perspective that really isn't available in other places about, who we are and what this life, what it means, and how Krishna has brought it all together. I mean, granted, the devotee's heart is in the spiritual world, but what Krishna has done here is incredible too. And reflections on the pastimes of the Bhagavatam help us to really see all of that in perspective to Krishna, in a way that we can give that and share that with others and have it be fresh always, and encouraging and enlivening. So I guess, I think all devotees have a relationship like that, but I really enjoy reading Bhagavatam. Like, if you ask me, what do you want to do this weekend? I think my absolute favorite thing would be able to sit down and talk about Bhagavatam, mutually with others who are interested to do the same.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I agree. I feel very much that my first experiences with Bhagavatam were similar, where I felt like everything is in this text, everything that we can
Exactly.
possibly
Right.
want or need to know, or it's all there. And I always thought it was so magical, even just to see the colors that were chosen together,
For each of the canto covers.
yeah, it's just, they just always, stuck out to me. You had mentioned sharing the knowledge with others and sharing the books with others. And I know that you also participate in reading groups with other devotees.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what inspired you to do that? Well, how did you come to reading with others?
Well, I've always liked that. In the mornings in the temples, we can hear, right? And that's very inspiring. But I was struck by I think I only saw one passage. I don't think I've ever seen this more than once, although it probably is stated, several times. But Prabhupada had, instructed the devotees, give class in the mornings, and then at the end of the week, have an ISKCON about what you read and talk about it amongst the devotees, ask questions, give answers, share your thinking. I always liked, interactive discussion like that about the Bhagavatam, because, I wanted to look at a point and really think about not just what I was thinking, but hear from others all at once, share that and have that experience of sharing that and get get everyone's thoughts and see how that coalesced or didn't with mine, and and then think about it some more. That's what I like to do. That's what I like to do. As I said, that's the happiest moments for me. That's the most interesting part of life for me. So, so my whole devotional service, I've always been looking with people to sit down and read with, always. But at different points, I've been able to connect with devotees and read with them. And it's just become a really important part of my life, and finding a few souls that, we can share our experiences around the different points and, talk about the importance, not just of reading, but of contemplating and self-contemplation and reflection, of really, what does this mean to us in our lives? And, how can, and from there, how can we share that with others? I mean, I just feel like it's an ingredient I have to have. And so, yes, reading groups are an important part of my life, especially now with my health diminished. I'm not out and about. So even though I live very close to a temple, I can't always make it there. It's not something that I can physically always do. And and even when I try, it's like just going there and coming back is all of it. I don't have a lot of capability to do more. So so reading groups, especially now with Zoom, wow, save me, I how can you feel inspired without having some, real Bhagavatam discussion? You have to have that in your life. So I think it's really important, actually. I think it's something that we should be doing more conscientiously. It's a good way for devotees to hear from others and be reflective themselves and gain a lot of strength from that association based around the Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam is like, we have relationships. We have a relationship with the Bhagavatam, and just like we have, like Krishna can be your father and your mother and, like your best friend and, your child and, all these different ways and relationships that we may have with the Supreme Lord. Similarly, with the Bhagavatam, we can have different relationships. It doesn't just have to be that we only listen to the Bhagavatam in the morning at class. we should be imbibing Bhagavatam and the essence of the Bhagavatam into, every step we take and every breath we breathe, every bit of association we have. And one really good way to, help connect that is reading groups. They just bring it into our everyday, every moment experience. And it's a relationship with peers or with, or maybe not just with peers. I mean, I read with God sisters who are, more advanced than me. And so I'm always learning, right?
Yeah, and it reminds me of what Srila Prabhupada said, is that he didn't just want us to read his books, he wanted us to study his books. And I think that's such a wonderful way to study, is to read with others and discuss what we've read. And as you said, to help us imbibe those qualities and actually put them, into use in practical life. I mean, that's the whole purpose of what we do when we study these texts.
Well, that's how it comes alive for us, right? And and you brought up, okay, he wanted us to, study them. So a very good way to do that, of course, another strong way to absorb yourself in Bhagavatam is by speaking Bhagavatam, by giving a class. I know for me, I was raised in the movement in a period of time where women did not speak. And so from the day that I joined until I'd been in the movement for, almost 20 years. Yeah. I never spoke a Bhagavatam class. And except for when I was on preaching, out preaching, I had some wonderful experiences with that. And then after 20 years of being a devotee, to all of a sudden start giving class, I kind of always shied away from that. I was really happy to help develop facility for my god sisters to speak, because I had so much faith, in my god sisters, and I was close even at that time to say Vishaka and Yamuna. I had some pretty steady association with during the time that we, were working with the GBC and opening up resolutions for women to give class and speak. But it's just so crucial. And, even in those early days when I didn't speak Bhagavatam class, the few times that I was able to were magical. And of course, one of the most obvious things right off the top is you think about, what am I going to say? And then, Prabhupada quotes, okay, Bhagavad Gita 5:27. So you look that verse up, and you look for different references, and you think of, and you pull different things in, and you think about that point and what you've read in other places, and, what your personal experience has been around, the different, the different verses, the different concepts, the different essences, I like to think of them as. And it brings everything together and it solidifies it. And then when you speak it, it becomes even more ingrained in your mind and in your head. So speaking Bhagavatam is another just so crucial and important way for strengthening your relationship with the Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada wanted us to read all the time. And, to me, it's like, well, yeah, you have to have the connection with the Bhagavatam in order to share that. If you're going to be a leader in our movement and and that you're not hearing the Bhagavatam in your mind, it's not ingrained in your mind and you're not hearing it in your heart, then what is propelling your words and your statements and your association with the devotees? And, where is that coming from? And so, to whatever degree we can, in whatever way we can, we want to be able to absorb ourselves in devotional service. And, japa, of course, is a very important ingredient of that. Association is a very important ingredient of all of that. Service is a very important ingredient. But really, even at the heart of each one of those things is Bhagavatam. You know, our realization of japa, you know, a lot of that comes because we're also reading Bhagavatam and hearing Krishna's pastimes. Our association becomes solidified when we understand what it means to associate, you know, and live a life of devotional service, which we hear through Bhagavatam, you know, and even our services, you know, they come alive, you know, with our understanding of Bhagavatam and giving that to other people. So I would say that the third most important thing in connecting with Bhagavatam is actually preaching, you know, and I think that devotees, you see what kind of inspiration overtakes a devotee when they meet someone on Sankirtan or go to somebody's home and they're just sharing with them about Bhagavatam and everything that's wonderful about Krishna consciousness. And that person, you know, opens up to that and gets excited. And there's a natural reciprocation that takes place that is, you know, really loving, you know. I mean, it's really special, right? And, you know, we're really giving the best of who we are and what we have, and they're connecting to something they've been looking for, at least to some degree. And it's, you know, the world stops, right? It's just, it's everything, right? So, yeah. So I'd say reading groups, giving, you know, giving classes and presentations and sharing, you know, Krishna consciousness. You know, it's Sankirtan, breaking open the storehouse of love of God and sharing, and, you know, according to your experience, your understanding, and hopefully someday our full, you know, our actual realization, sharing that with others, and, you know, seeing Krishna in their heart. Yeah.
Well, like you said, it sounds magical. It's a magical composition of elements that just bring us closer and closer to Krishna. And you've mentioned several times now association and sharing with others, and connecting with other devotees. And I think that that's such a beautiful part of our movement, and to be able to have others who are, you know, studying these books, chanting and practicing devotional service brings us to such a deep level. And I was wondering what you are, why you feel it is, or I'm sorry, why you feel it is important for us to read regularly.
I'd like to answer that, but I want to also say that about something about that element of sharing. You know, I think one of the elements that has to be really appreciated and meditated on is that when we are sharing like that, Krishna's taking over. You know, he's writing within our heart. He's personally present there. He's giving us the words. We're experiencing a deepened relationship with Krishna, not just within, you know, ourselves, but a connection that we're sharing, right?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, that's such a special thing. Sometimes it's just like, we just need to let Krishna act through us and get out of the way. You know, we think we know so much, you know, just like, you know, just pray to Krishna and let him, you know, guide us and give us the words. That's a very special, you know, heartwarming experience for the devotee. So, you know, about reading regularly, I mean, again, it comes back to, you know, the goal ultimately is that, you know, moment to moment, we're remembering Krishna every 16th of a second to every 16th of a second. So, you know, at least we need to have as steady of a lifetime experience in devotional life as we can. And, you know, that connection with Bhagavatam, you know, we want to make that, you know, our heart and soul, the center of our life. So we need to regulate it into our lives. You know, again, when we don't do that, it's being filled with something else, right? So, you know, plus, you know, for the devotee, once the taste is there, you want to, you want to read, you want to hear about the stories and the pastimes. You want to share those with other people. You feel like you don't have enough opportunity and you aren't doing enough. You want to do that, on a regular basis, And it is tough. I mean, we live in a world of passion. It's not always, a straightforward thing that we're going to, just absorb ourselves. I mean, that takes work. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of, craving to want to do that, just to be able to hold on sometimes, and people's lives are very, very busy. So
yes,
just maintaining body and soul. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, with associating with other devotees who are practicing the same thing and reading together and studying regularly or reading regularly, it not only strengthens our connections to one another, it also strengthens our connection to Krishna. On such a deep, deep level. Yeah.
It has to be, it has to be. Our temples should be sanctuaries. We should be able to go into a temple, and I think this is generally what it is for most people, to walk into a temple and feel, here I have my association, here I have my reading, my opportunity to hear the pastimes of the Supreme Lord, to be absorbed in the sound vibration of spiritual life, to have service, to do these things together, and to heal from my day. I think if we're remembering how personally present Krishna is and how specially present he is within the pages of the Bhagavatam, we can, really meditate more too on extending and sharing that mood with others around us. A devotee is always meant to be a friend to all, including each other. And, Bhagavatam teaches us how to overcome polarities. It teaches us how to get into the essences of life. It teaches us how to embody the qualities of a devotee and see them personified in the great, wonderful devotees. I mean, just pick any pastime and consider how much, richness there is and how much there is to share. I love reading the prayer, the teachings of Prahlad Maharaj, because they're so beneficent, and it's, one of my go-tos. But I also love, hearing about the sages of Namasharanya and how they perform this 1,000-year sacrifice, for the, just because they were concerned about the people in general with the onslaught of Kali Yuga. And they were doing everything that they could, to help ensure that Kali would not have as strong as an impact on everyone's lives. I mean, they just gave their whole life to people that, were coming in the future. Devotees are so beneficent. So let's practice that beneficence and make the pages of Bhagavatam come alive. Prahlad Maharaj, may there be, he was a well-wisher to everybody. He wanted that, everyone in this world, was peaceful and, connected to Krishna. And, and then you have the story of Prithu and, all the dynamics of what it means, having a king doesn't just mean, it's not autocracy. It's it's a person who, everything is devoted to the citizens of his kingdom. It's a certain type of leadership, that, right now is just not on the table. I mean, there are beneficent people and there are leaders who, do more for their people and less. I mean, some people really appreciate the Queen, for example, in England, or some of the different presidents that we've had here in the States. But in general, the ability to be able to extend that and really have it be there to the point where a citizen can come before the king and tell them what's wrong, and the king will fix it. We're not, but yet we can hear that and we can understand about it. And it can help us to try harder to be more attentive and to be more chivalrous and to be more caring and to be stronger, and to take a stand for goodness, something that really needs to be there in this world because it's so lacking. I'm just, I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but there's so many wonderful, stories within every page of the Bhagavatam. There's just something special, that we want to be able to think about. And right now I'm reading the story of Gajendra. And we're actually doing a Gajendra show for the radio, right? So I'm so absorbed in this story, the narration of the description of Trikuta mountain and the island and where Gajendra was living and all the demigods and all this and along comes Gajendra and meeting his destiny and it's just it's like it's a great story. It's a great story for kids. It's a great story for adults. It's a great story for thinking about, our journey from one life to another. It's just like, it's just, there's just so much within, every single page again of the Bhagavatam. So, yeah.
Yes. As you're pointing out, there are so many incredible lessons to learn from Bhagavatam. And I was thinking, as you were speaking, I was just kind of envisioning you sharing it with others. I know you've told me about some of your experiences on Sankirtan and distributing books. And I was wondering if you would share some of those stories or what that was like for you to be out there distributing Srila Prabhupada's books to the world, basically sharing this message with people you didn't know, with strangers.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been many years since I've been a Sankirtan devotee, and there are new and fresh stories that that are happening every single day, and it probably it's nice to hear new and fresh experiences. I can only share the same experiences that I've, shared because I don't, I don't have that personal kind of contact in the same way anymore. But yeah,
well, what was that like for you to be able to share those books with others, knowing that you were giving them something so very valuable, more than just a book?
Yeah. I just had a lot of wonderful experiences, traveling and preaching over so many years. I would say, first of all, I find it to be like one of the most loving experiences and happiest moments in my life when I do actually get a chance to share with somebody who, takes to Krishna consciousness and to see that awakening inside of them. But yeah, I'm trying to think of which stories I would share with you right now, because some of them, are lengthy, like actual relationships developed where people came to Krishna consciousness. And so that sharing of devotional life continued in that mood for, months or, like that. So, I think one thing is that when we put ourselves out for Krishna kind of enters in our heart and takes over in a very special way, and so sometimes those are the most special moments. I'm just trying to think. I mean, a lot of it is just, one element and dimension of that is just how Krishna lets you know that he's there so that you can feel confident and comfortable to be able to share what you understand. Even if you've just been a devotee for, a year, you have something to share with someone who has never practiced Krishna consciousness. And so as much as possible, we want to, have faith in that connection with Krishna so that we can speak. And, then when we do speak, wonderful things happen. I had an opportunity to travel just for a short period of time in Southeast Asia. And, I was traveling on my own, completely just me through Malaysia. And I remember one time I was in a city called Ipoh. And to my knowledge, at that time, there was no temple there. And I got into town and I was like, okay, where am I going to stay? What am I doing? What am I going to do here? So I just, was chatting on my beads and walking around and, getting, I had my books and stuff, getting maybe some fruit. And I was walking through, the mercantile district, and there was someone selling cloth there with a picture of, was it? Yeah, it was Prabhupada in his shop, and I just walked in and I introduced myself, and told him a little bit about who I was, what I was doing. And he immediately invited me home with his family, and I ended up staying there for a couple of weeks with his wife, and his children were young. And we would hold regular programs. And, I was just speaking Bhagavatam, and, hundreds of people would come. Right. And I was just like, how old was I then? I wasn't even 30. Just having that opportunity, and to have that happen repeatedly in various cities as I was traveling through Malaysia. And, I was able to do a similar thing in the Pacific Northwest. And I remember one relationship, we became so close that that the woman who where I was staying owned 500 acres of land. And so after doing a few programs and, selling her a set of Chaitanya Charitamritas and talking about how, in this particular series, how this was about the relationships, the loving relationships and exchanges of the devotees, and about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and who he was. And her taking the set, she offered to me that if I could bring 4 grihastas to settle down on that land, that she would donate that land to ISKCON. Mm-hmm. So wonderful things happen around book distribution, around sharing Krishna consciousness. It's kind of like the saying that, the camera's worth $25 and this is worth 100 and something else is worth 1,000. But, this is priceless. So the real priceless thing is Krishna consciousness. And when you give someone their heart, they give their heart back. You could get $5 for a book or $20 for a couple of books or, so much for a set. But if you actually engage their heart and they give the heart, then they give everything, and that becomes a loving reciprocation. And, of course, we want to approach those relationships delicately and, build them. We're now, responsible for that person's creeper. So we don't want it to be crushed or to become minimized or to become forgotten or any of those things. And yet, I guess that is one of the sadder things that, there is always talk about developing contact sankirtan, like keeping long-term relationships. And I know they do that a lot more these days, but that's an area that can be developed in so many ways. And I know Vaisheshika, he, works in a lot of ways to develop those longer-term relationships and give people things. So really, book distribution and our relationships with others, our understanding of the Lord in our heart and in everyone's heart, not just new devotees, by the way, each other as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's all very centrally connected, because again, the Bhagavatam is a personality, the supreme personality, and the individuals and people within it are all, devotees, people, real people who live these experiences and, we're dependent on Krishna and having these experiences, and they're now being shared, across time and space, so that they can always be remembered because of how special and unique they are. So when we hear these things, we're motivated, to follow in the footsteps of all the wonderful devotees and develop our natures spiritually and devotionally and give what we can, in the hopes of also having that same memory of Krishna, that same dependence on the Supreme Lord, that same loving exchange with the Lord and with his devotees. Yeah.
Something that just occurred to me as you were speaking about preaching in the Philippines. Was there anyone else preaching there before you, or had you gone in there as maybe the first to preach in those areas?
There was a community on the island of Cebu.
Okay.
And that was a really devotees probably know Vatsala in North Carolina. He was the president in that community at that time. It was a new community when I was there. It was only a few years old, but he had made something very special and beautiful. They had all these like bamboo houses up on these, like they were like above the ground, like and it was like the house was up there. And they had built a temple room and were doing outreach. But the community, it was really more about developing that particular community there. The Philippines is, it's a conglomeration of quite a number of islands. I don't remember the number, but I think it's, like over 100 little islands. And most places are very separated from, there's several different languages, and, there's the North and the Central and the South, and each one has its own culture. And the Philippines is an interesting place. Like the word for teacher in one of their languages is guru, there's Tulsi, and, that's growing naturally there. And, the islands where the pirates and stuff lived were called the Bishayan Islands, like, the islands of sense enjoyment. Yeah. They're very close, they're not that far from India. And India, of course, out of Dwarka were all these massive ships that, would travel and trade and do all these things. So, the Philippines was probably one of their closer ports, and we don't really know the history of the Philippines because when the Spanish came, they burnt all the libraries and, everything that had come before. But, it's an interesting place. Anyway, it was a hard place to preach because the people were struggling so much. They had just different, the Japanese had come through, then they were, that was during World War II. So when the Japanese were there, they were, mining all the natural assets, taking everything of value out of the country, and very heavy-handed with the people that were there. So there, as an example, the Spanish long-term control and also, conquers, So it was a very, very difficult place. They had lost many things, but they were such pious, gentle, sweet, religious people that would give you the shirt off their back. If we would sit down in front of a house, they would come out and bring us something to drink, ask us if we wanted anything to eat, just because we were sitting there in saris. So preaching there was very, very hard, but it was also very, very personal and rewarding in that way. You know, the intimacy that you could develop. They weren't, you know, they were giving, they weren't guarded, you know, in general, like what I have experienced even in my own hometown, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I feel very much the same way. In the West, we are so very guarded. And the one time that I did get to go to Vrindavan, when I went to India, that was one of the first things that struck me, is how open everyone was, and how it was so easy to connect with others without using words. You know, it was just, I kept feeling these heart connections everywhere I turned, with, you know, people I had never seen before, and you know, had never, you know, really been experienced their culture by being, you know, immersed in it the way that I was, and was really, really beautiful, really beautiful.
You can see that, you know, when genuine ethics are developed within a community, that they last, you know, for a long period of time. And Prabhupada has talked about that somewhat in relation to Varnashram. You know, one of the importance of establishing Varnashram to give a system so that people can be engaged. You know, he said Varna first, where they can engage their natural propensities and bring out their qualities and connection with the Supreme Lord. You know, even when they're not necessarily like fully absorbed in reading Bhagavatam and all this, because the society is just based around that connection with Krishna, you know, so it allows everyone to have a sense of understanding, even if they're not like fully absorbed Brahminically, or, you know, as you know, initiated disciples or any of those kinds of things. You know, just a means, and that, and he was stating how those, you know, principles, once they become established in the society, like he was saying, like in India, you still see those principles in there. And he's not talking about like, you know, I'm a Brahmin, I'm a Kshatriya, I'm a Sudra, but he's talking about the qualities, you know, the understanding of certain values and, you know, philosophical points and those kinds of things. They've stayed thousands and thousands and thousands of years because of a good, you know, social organizational system, and because the principles became embedded in the hearts and minds of everyone within that system. So, you know, similarly, you know, if we can really cultivate and become good examples of, you know, what it means to have the qualities of a devotee, you know, to share in a way that exemplifies Prabhupada and exemplifies Bhagavatam, you know, at least then we're, you know, we're doing the best we can, right? We're giving what we have to give.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I mean, that's essentially why Srila Prabhupada came here in the first place, was to help us learn how to be a proper culture, so to speak, a spiritual culture, so that we could connect on a deeper level with Krishna, and not just, you know, like you said, live as Brahmins and Kshatriyas and Vaishyas and Sudras, but really imbibe those qualities that.
Well, yeah, I mean, those things can become all externals, and they can become all about the bodily concept. You know, we're concerned with Daivi Vanashram, which means that we're putting Krishna first. We're putting each individual's relationship with Krishna first, right? We're engaging people according to their propensities and desires, and where everyone can be contributing fully, you know, along with their capabilities in a way that is compatible, you know, instead of throwing the rocks in the water and having all the ripples collide. we have a central point that we're working towards, right?
Yes.
But what's so special about Krishna is he's not limited. So it's not that we need to limit anyone
Right.
in that relationship with Krishna, rather just the opposite. We want to provide facility for them to be able to give everything they have in devotional life. And we can't lead that way if we're not connected by reading and contemplating Bhagavatam and sharing it and discussing it and studying it. And the sages in Naimisharanya, when they were performing that sacrifice, what were they doing? They sat down with Sutta Goswami and discussed Bhagavatam, right? Even just the vibration of that sacrifice was enough to purify the earth environment, for so many thousands of years. And now, of course, Bhagavatam is available. It's not just being passed down orally, it's available in a book in pages, so someone like you or I can walk into a dorm room and find a copy of it and, begin our pursuits of devotional life.
Absolutely. So
anyone can, right? Anyone. And anyone who picks it up and anything that they can do that gives another person Krishna, that's glorious. And I think one of the first most important principles in giving others Krishna and establishing any kind of community on any level is that we're not going to denigrate, minimize. We're going to support, uplift, improve, love, give what we are actually really feeling and experiencing through reading Bhagavatam.
And so much of that is needed right now in this time of our history. All of those things you just listed, we need them so deeply right now with so much suffering happening in the world and so much.
That's right.
And so much, by, studying these books, by reading these books, by sharing these books, and practicing devotional service, we can overcome so much that's happening right now.
It's an imperfect world, and we see how imperfect it is, when we see the pestilence, when we see the, the fighting, the just the meaningless, abuse and, just all the different forms of suffering and disease and, everything that, just mean-spiritedness and polarity and all of this, when we see all of this around us, it helps us to remember how important it is that we have something else, that we have that connection with Krishna. Every step that anyone takes forward, any positive, successful, endeavor to embrace devotional life, we need to, glorify that, hang on to that, uplift that, appreciate that, value every individual. This is not a perfect world. We're not seeking perfection. That's not going to happen. We're not going to try and tell people that they're not doing good enough because they're not perfect enough. We're going to say, yes, stay on the path, struggling a little bit, I'm here for you. You don't fall directly into, my category of, perfection in, devotional life or, quote unquote Vanashram, but you're doing these things. Right. And that means everything to me, to see you doing these things and to see, how that benefits others and how that's making you grow, and the more that people are engaged like that, the other things do fall by the wayside. Prabhupada taught us that, And every single one of us is mixed. I mean, except for the pure devotee, which is the very extremely rare soul, we're all mixed. So we all have our, well, not so good sides, and then we all do have our, better qualities. And, society means that we're going to bring the better qualities out in each other.
Yes, and that's how you build a strong community and a strong movement. We
Right.
build a stronger ISKCON by
Right.
connecting.
And the externals may not always line up, but that's not really the important thing.
Right.
It's not important in the sense that it's just not important. And, also these bodies are temporary and these designations are temporary. What is important is that we're fanning that spark in the heart of every living being and giving them the opportunity to be engaged. And in reciprocation, each one of us should be reading, and chanting, and, doing everything that we can to reciprocate with Krishna and to, embody and to be a vessel for, giving others Krishna. So, yeah, we have so much. Our conditioning holds us back, but we should know that our goal is to overcome that conditioning and to work on it,
Exactly.
That's a lot of what the regulation is all about. The regulation helps us to just automatically go on, keep performing our devotional service.
Yeah. And I was also, as we were speaking about, the difficulties of this time, in Kali Yuga, in 2022, where there's so much happening. And I was thinking, how have you been able to overcome certain obstacles in your life? As I, was reading in the introduction about how, with your health, you do have some challenges and limitations in your service.
Yeah.
And so how have you been able to overcome those obstacles or make things work for you so that you can continue to practice Krishna consciousness?
Well, spirit drives the heart, right? I mean, if we have a good foundation in our spiritual life, the externals are secondary, and there's going to come a lot of times in life, many, many times, where we're all going to have things that we're going to have to overcome. Sometimes those things are bigger than others, but, they're always there. And so we want to have a richness in our life, a spiritual richness in our life that always propels us, and that always gives us inspiration and a reason to want to keep moving forward. And, I mean, just to be frank, when you're not feeling good, there's different ways that you deal with that. And I think one way that a devotee deals with that is by taking shelter, not because they're living in denial of their, external experiences, but because they're, still deriving it's a self-satisfaction and a constant, source of upliftment and happiness. I mean, whatever we can do for Krishna, and when we do it, we're absorbed in that. It's, it's part of our individual journey in life. It's part of our individual relationship with the Lord. It's part of our creativity. It's part of our gentleness. It's part of our thinking and intelligence and reflection, all things that are so much more interesting and desirable than just being sick. So, or thinking, I mean, yeah, you got to take time and pay your taxes, or, go to work from 9 to 5, and you have to do all these things. But the more that we have that richness inside of us, the more that these things take on a different dimension and also don't overpower, our mindset, moment to moment, our heart, our desires, our interests, our, all of these things. because we know we're more than all of that. And that's part of what it means to support a devotee, to help them understand that they're more than, the mundane experiences that they're facing and suffering and struggling with every single day. That's why we have to be very personal and put others first, and not let rules and regulations and, becoming mechanical and, how we live or how we practice and observe our spiritual life overtake us. It has to always be, a cultivation that is embracing a sense of devotion and personalism and internal reflection, a desire to understand, to go deeper, to share that with other people. That's the kind of support that matters in life. Not just telling someone what they can and can't or should or shouldn't, and, but actually to encourage them to want to read together, to share what we're experiencing and how Krishna is reciprocating with this in our lives, to hear others' understandings and to open those up, to break open the storehouse of love of God and have those experiences of chanting together, of speaking katha together, of hearing, of serving, of having prasadam, of exchanging gifts, of revealing your mind.
Yeah. As I was listening to you, I was also reflecting on the challenges that many of us have in the Grahastha ashram, how, it was just so inspiring to hear you say how important it is to really think about, what's deeply in your heart and how you connect with Krishna on that level, rather than focusing so much on the rigid rules, or rigidly focusing is what I meant to say, rigidly focusing on rules, or again, it brings me to Niyamagraha, where you're following those rules for the sake of following rules without really understanding what those rules are meant to teach you or where they're meant to bring you. And so, as
life is a balance. We're meant to find the balance internally. And Rupa Goswami does give that important discussion: accept what's favorable, reject what's unfavorable. In Grihastha ashram, it's a very interesting situation because, on the one hand, most of us joined the temple as single individuals and had a chance to absorb ourselves in devotional life. Not everyone, but a good portion of us. And, brahmachari, brahmacharini, sannyas life, there's a huge opportunity for absorbing yourself every day, every moment, in hearing, in chanting, in service, being able to, you can easily read, you have ready access to Bhagavatam, you have time, you have all these things. In Grihastha life, a lot of that time is just chewed right up. Maharaj chewing the chewed. You have to go to work, right? You have kids. The kids need you to change their diapers. They wake you up at night, or they spend your money, or, they do all kinds of stuff. You need to be guiding them in life. I mean, as a parent, really, you give everything you have, every heart, your heart, every moment, everything that you can do, you do for your children, you do. It's just kind of a natural, instinctive, and Prabhupada said close to love in this material world thing to do. It absorbs you and everything around that, having the money to pay for the house, for your healthcare, for this, for that, relationships, entertainment, all of that is embedded into the Grihastha ashram. And that takes away huge portions of your time for, just being free to read and chant and serve. Of course, the service, serving the ashram and seeing the ashram in a spiritual context is a service also of its own. But there are other blessings of the Grihastha ashram, that help us grow in spiritual life. And those lessons are necessary for everyone, including the sannyasis and the brahmacharis, to, because we're building our communities, we're building the foundation of our societies, we're raising the future, whether it's future devotees or future professions. The things are happening in the Grihastha ashram, and there's many, many lessons that are special and kind of unique to that experience, like patience, the growth of patience, working with other individuals, learning selflessness, becoming stable. There's so many valuable characteristics that one grows through in the Grihastha ashram that help to strengthen everyone's practice of spiritual life in the community. I mean, just in a very, one of the more, I don't want to use the word gross because it's not gross in that way, but, very material way that the Grihastha ashram matters in our devotional communities is finance. Just as for example, that needs to be there. Someone has to be doing that. And, that's helping to support those individuals to have that time to read and chant and do all those things. We're dependent on each other and our different activities in many, many ways. And so, we need to learn to honor dignity. We could call it spiritual dignity, spiritual integrity of the individual, the creeper of every being. And, in exchange for these lessons that and resources that the Grihastha ashram are providing, we give as much as we can of our heart when we're reading and chanting and having the ability to do that and sharing that, with others who can't do that all day, every day. And we understand, so, our life changes when we go from being a brahmachari to being a grihastha, or being a brahmacharini and being a mother, or, our life changes dramatically. But the heart and the essence of who we are as devotees can and must stay in place in all of those circumstances, even if externally they appear differently. And so, again, reading when we can. If we can't, it's a lot harder, I think, in the Grihastha ashram to even say, for example, go to the morning program. But I think it's extremely natural for, people who are in the Grihastha ashram to want to associate with others in the Grihastha ashram. And reading groups are a good way to do that. It's a good way to have a personal exchange and to reflect on Bhagavatam and to read steadily and to increase your desire to want to do that. Sitting down in the evening with your family or with friends and having some kirtan and sharing Bhagavatam, reading, everybody takes turn reading a passage, say what it means to them. It's a very intimate exchange. Don't you love it? I mean, I love it.
Yes, absolutely. Anytime I can be in a class for Bhagavatam even is just so enriching. I know I find myself in my morning Bhagavatam class on Zoom, practically in tears, almost there's always something about the class, no matter who's giving it, that is just, I often think that I'm often amazed that we get this opportunity on a daily basis, whether it's through Zoom or whether you're living in a temple or whether you're, like you said, with family. Yeah. We actually get the opportunity to contemplate this wisdom, and like you said in the beginning, to hear all of these pastimes that have so many incredible lessons to teach us, and again, because it's coming from Bhagavatam or, Bhagavad Gita, it's actually touching us on a very deep level, in addition to what we're, learning intellectually. So
Yeah.
it just, and you can, that just doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. We can't have that experience anywhere else. And as devotees, we get to have it regularly. It's available
Mhm.
to us. I was also thinking about, because you are doing the radio, you do so much hearing. You
Yeah.
hear
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And so how, you know, like I said, you're getting so much just from hearing, where others may be getting more from reading, or things like that. So you're making it, you're finding a way that it works in your life. You're making it work in your life in a way that maybe others cannot. Maybe some are more attached to chanting, or some are more attached to archanam, to deity worship, or however.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Bhagavatam was passed through oral reception. Hearing was the dynamic that opened up spiritual understanding for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And, hearing enters the heart in a certain kind of a way. I mean, I think it penetrates in many ways, deeper than a visual image, right?
Mm.
So hearing is reading, really. It's reading is a way to hear, because we don't retain everything anymore, just through oral reception. So when we put it down on a page, it stays there. It's locked in stone, so to speak. So that enables Bhagavatam not to lose its, purity and essence, right? Because if it was just going through oral reception, we probably would mess it up quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, hearing Prabhupada give class, for example, in the morning, it's really not different from Bhagavatam. I mean, we're reading Bhagavatam when we hear class, I mean, that's a fact. We're reading the verse, we're chanting the verse, we're reading the purport, we're discussing it. So, I mean, that hearing is really essentially non-different from reading. The point is that we're absorbing spiritual life. It's what it really comes down to. The pastimes of the Lord and his devotees, the essences of spiritual practice, the means to live our life in a spiritual way, to understand, like when you walk outside, what do you see? Well, that's going to be dependent upon your consciousness. Right? You might not notice anything. You might walk outside, not notice the trees or the flowers or any of that kind of stuff. Or you might say, I'm going to go cut that tree down because I'm going to use it to do this and that, which may have nothing to do of value for much of anyone, except that you built whatever it was that you were going to build, right? Or you might see, this is Krishna's creation. And Prabhupada said, even the trees are our family, right? Soul is present there. The trees giving shelter, right? I mean, we hear about that, stronger, more tolerant than a tree. We sit under a tree and it's 10 degrees cooler in the summer than being in the sun. It's a place of respite and shelter. And we learn a little bit about what shelter means from a tree. What is it that we see? It's going to be dependent on how our mind is absorbed.
Well, Sudharma, thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to talk to you and hear all of these things that you've shared. It's been I know for myself, it's been very inspiring. There's so much richness in what you have to say. And it makes me feel even more connected to Bhagavatam, just from everything that you've said about reading it with others, and all of the beautiful lessons that we have to gain from it. And I'm just so grateful. And I just want to ask you if there's anything else that you would like to share.
Probably. I don't have anything that comes to mind in the moment. Again, just to say thank you. I just would want to say thank you to all of the devotees, for everything that they give. The service of every individual has really enriched my life in different ways. We don't always agree on everything. We don't always have the same and share the same understandings of what we're reading in the pages of Bhagavatam. But, I do believe that the devotees, they're making earnest efforts, whether we're, bringing forward our stronger qualities or struggling with our weaknesses. We're all trying together to somehow or another to remember Krishna. And, being a part of the Krishna Consciousness movement with all its faults and difficulties, which can be very difficult sometimes, is really all that's really mattered to me in my life, at the end of the day. And so I'm grateful for, the devotees that have cooked all the feasts and, developed, the recipes and left behind information about prasadam and, and helped us to learn how to live a more wholesome devotional life through prasadam. I'm grateful for all the beautiful outfits that the devotees, put on the altar for every moment of preaching, that someone's been out in a van, and the sweat and the difficulty in management and taking and assuming responsibilities. And, for the people who just keep, life going in devotional service and keep us moving forward. None of these things are easy. So in that way, I would like us all to be grateful too for, every page of the Bhagavatam and, everything that brings alive in us and all the information that it's given us, and that we can somehow build together, something that people will want to be a part of and grow into here in the West, not just traditionally from the Eastern Hemisphere and India in particular, but here in the West, to just imbibe Krishna consciousness even into this society. And that can be done. And, I may not be here to see it, but I see that there are wonderful devotees who are working to do that. And I'm very grateful for being part of that association.
Thank you. Thank you. Sudharma. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Vancha kalpa
tarubhyascha kripa sindhubi evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai. Glories to the Vaishnavas.
All glories to the Vaishnavas. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Jai. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.